Okay. What is going on, y'all? Today's date, well, who cares? And it is, all you need to know is it's a Thursday. Or is it? That's the world we're living in now. I don't know if you guys have seen, but recently this AI voice simulator has come out. So now, not only do we have deep fake technology, you can essentially fake anyone's voice. You can change any speech. The video I watched was a Leonardo DiCaprio speech, and they changed it. They changed his voice to like a bunch of different celebrities. I forget what celebrities they were, but it's like Joe Rogan. They made him sound like Joe Rogan, and some other people. So yeah, that is Revelation is starting to make more and more sense. I mean, technology is starting to shake things up so much that it really is. It actually ties perfectly into what today's podcast is about. I watched a documentary called The Net, came out in 2003. It gets into cybernetics. It gets into where a lot of these elite scientists and psychologists are trying to take us as far as in the future. And yeah, it totally ties into this concept that soon we will not be able to trust or know what to trust, or like verifying things are going to get harder and harder. So why do we even care about verifying things? It's just going to get easier and easier for to build a case about truth being subjective. Yeah, that's something that they talk about, is this idea of cybernetics, or there also being like this union between our thoughts and feelings being in communication, almost communion with AI. So yeah, it's an interesting concept. It's really interesting to get. This documentary covers a couple of people where they kind of share their philosophy on the concept. And yeah, the philosophy, I mean, it very much ties into this idea that to verify things, we will all need to put our faith in, almost like a fact checker. And that's what AI will be. It will be this thing that actually tells us what the truth is, because you won't be able to know whether someone just made this up. Is it a deep fake? Is it AI changing the voice? And so somehow we will all surrender control to basically some sort of a science mind, meaning something science creates will now be our leader. It will be our God. It will be the thing that tells us how society should be ran and how it's running. Okay, so it's this film came out in this documentary came out in 2003, and it's by Lutz Dombeck, Dambeck, The Net, the Unabomber, LSD, and the Internet. So the first character he introduces, the first person he brings into the scene is John Brockman. In the 60s, John Brockman was kind of in the art scene, in the multimedia scene with John Cage and Andy Warhol and Jonas Mekas. I don't know who Jonas Mekas is. I don't know what Jonas Mekas does. Let's look it up. Lithuanian American filmmaker, poet, and artist. He's been called the godfather of American avant-garde cinema. So yeah, so he was in that scene in the 60s. I forget, he was playing his banjo walking around, and he ran into Jonas Mekas, I think. And then immediately they started working together. I think Jonas invited him to work on some stuff. So in the 60s, he was kind of in this multimedia art scene. And then as the 80s approach, he's kind of there on the cusp and catching the wave as new tech turns into big business. And as this happens, he gets rich in the 80s. And as this happens, basically, he starts a publishing company, and he kind of acts as an agent. Well, he doesn't act. He is an agent for books for physicists, genetic researchers, computer scientists. And he basically markets them like pop stars. which is so interesting because I've just never thought about that within that scene and that world, but it makes complete sense. There's another documentary I watched, What We Do in Public. Let me look it up. And I watched it years ago, probably when it came out. Dang, I can't remember what it's called. It's basically a documentary about this guy who wants to simulate what it's going to be like in the future. And so he rents, I'm pretty sure, some warehouse or something in New York, and he invites all these people to come live in I'm pretty sure this is right when the internet had just come out. And because I think the guy who did this, him and his girlfriend were the first people to ever put cameras in their house and basically live stream. They just had cameras up. I don't think there was audio. There might have been, but they put their lives up so everyone could see it. And they were the first people to do it. And that's the guy that created this kind of social experiment. And inside of this world that he creates, there's a camera in every room. And most of the rooms, especially the like private rooms where each person sleeps, they all have a camera and then a remote, or a camera and a TV and a remote, so that they can flip through the channels and they can watch all the different cameras in the house at any time. There's cameras in the bathrooms, there's cameras in the kitchen. I mean, there's cameras everywhere, and it's all like, gosh, it's got to be something about privacy, or something. Okay, yeah. So the documentary was done by this guy, Josh Harris, who was an American internet entrepreneur. And the documentary is called We Live in Public, and it came out in 2009. Let's see. And it was done by Andi Timiner. Yeah. Anyways, it was done by this woman who did the Dig documentary that was about Brian Jonestown Massacre and Dandy Warhols. She did this documentary, and it was wild because in this world, they all have, everything's taken care of, right? So it's kind of like a simulation of what it could be like when everyone is being surveillanced, and we also depend on the government for things. So it's like, even though it obviously was kind of a part of it, I don't know how intentional that part of it was. I don't know if that was the thing that kind of got people to do the experiment because they were supposed to live in this place. Let me read it. Let me see. So yeah, on the film, it's an art project, Quiet, We Live in Public. And it's an Orwellian Big Brother concept developed in the late 90s, which placed more than 100 artists in a human terrarium under New York City, with myriad webcams following and capturing every move the artists made. So, yeah, and then it was like a Japanese style capsule hotel. So like everyone was in their pod, and it was crazy because they had food taken care of. They had drugs there. They even had a sanctuary in there. They tried to reduplicate the outside world inside this experiment. And at first everything's going great, and then it's just wild to see people's turn. I mean, and there's a club, and there's a dancing, and there's partying, and but what's nuts is like when it all falls apart. I don't know how long they were supposed to stay down there. I know they didn't make it. I don't know if there was a set time. But it spoiler alert, it doesn't end well, right? And I think eventually I don't want to give, well, whatever. Eventually, the police get called, and I think the experiment only lasts 30 days. But at one point, there's a huge shift. There's a huge shift in the attitudes of the people participating, and it's crazy because at one point they're all sitting around the dinner table with their knives and forks, just being like, "We want food, we want food." Like they just turn crazy, and everyone, like, people just want to be able to shower in private. People don't want to always be watched. I'm sure there was some creeping going around. I think I remember like a shower scene because I haven't watched this in it's been over. I mean, I watched it in 2009, so whatever. It's been over 10 years. But I think there's a shower scene where like it's like a circle room, and there's all these different shower heads, but people are, and then it's enclosed by glass, so that itself is like a shower, terrarium almost. People are just like standing too close to each other in the shower at some point. You're just like, dude, Get away from me. So it was a crazy experiment because it kind of just this idea of what will happen as science, technology, and politics all merge together to be its own religion, and what that will do to us as a species. So definitely recommend that documentary. I should probably watch it again. Maybe I'll do a podcast on it. So we got this John Brockman guy, and he's publishing. His publishing company is at the center of like a global network of scientists and artists and multimedia managers, and it's the cyber elite. It combines multimedia and business, and he refers to it as the Diggerati, which let me look that up again. I looked it up the other day. Well, the meaning is people who people with expertise or professional involvement in information technology. And that is exactly what cybernetics is concerned with. Cybernetics is concerned with how often, again, cybernetics, quantum physics, this is all studying how information travels. So cybernetics is concerned with how the transfer of information functions in machines and living beings. The basis of cybernetics is the assumption that the human nervous system does not reproduce reality, but calculates it. Which is absolutely crazy. I mean, just that concept, that it blew my mind. And when you do psychedelics and when you deal with things like sleep paralysis, or, when you work out too hard, I mean, it's crazy how much, at least as a kid, the last thing on your mind, at least for me, was my nervous system. Like, you always thought about breaking bones or pulling muscles or scrapes and blood and skin and, but you never thought about your nervous system and how important that is. And it wasn't until I started doing psychedelics that I really knew, or actually in smoking pot, like got me. Sometimes it would like kind of make my hand shake because I'd smoke something that would get me all racy. And that I realized, I was like, oh, this is my nervous system. And it is crazy what they're saying here. I mean, yeah, it doesn't reproduce reality. It calculates it. So they really are looking at our nervous system as like a quantum calculator on some level. Yeah, I mean, they see our nervous system as like this amazing information processing machine. So in 1993, John Brockman's network was hit with a bomb attack, and it was a scientist, Ted Kaczynski, was arrested for this bomb attack. And I don't know. I wrote the Expanded Cinema Festival. I forget exactly what that was. I think that's something John Brockman did where he brought together. It was like just a festival on cinema, maybe. I forget. Whatever. But this is the first quote I have from him. So this is John Brockman quoting someone else. I forgot who he's quoting, but he said, "We create tools, then we mold ourselves to our use of them. We create the tech, then we are the tech. It's not your heart is like a pump. Your heart is a pump. It's not your brain is like a computer. Your brain is a computer until the next thing comes along." And one thing I just noticed about John Brockman was in this interview, he had some like yellowing in his cheeks, just some health things. I don't know if I know it almost looked like liver related, but that's just a hunch. But yeah, I mean, it was just crazy to see this discoloration, this yellowing in his cheeks. And then when I'm pretty sure when it was Lutz, he's interviewing John Brockman, and he asks about Ted Kaczynski. And of course, John Brockman just like he shuts down the interview at that point, and it's like it's not even this. I'm not going to dignify a response, right? That's his reaction. And the other thing I noticed was he kind of had a twitch, but man, did it get worse with the Ted Kaczynski thing. This kind of jerking reaction, and I always notice that in people, and I always wonder. I mean, we all know that that's just information being information and experience being kind of stored in the body in a certain way, and you're not processing something, so there's like a backfiring happening or a sputtering happening. It's all connected to your thought process and your feelings and what you're trying to hide or what you're willing to show and be transparent about. So anyways, so they start talking about, and I did not know anything about Ted Kaczynski's manifesto. So the Washington Post gets a letter. This is in 1996, and it's from the Freedom Club, and it demands publication of the manifesto. And from 1998 to 1995, the U.S. is shaken by a series of bomb attacks. They're like major airline execs and scientists basically at elite universities. That's who's getting bombed. And the code name is Unabomber, and they were saying that a CPU abbreviation of the words university and airlines. I don't get that. I'm not gonna lie. Somehow codename Unabomber is the CPU of your, let me look up a CPU abbreviation. Well, maybe someone can help me out with that, because I don't, for right now, nothing's. I said, what is the CPU abbreviation for university? And it just came up with the Central Philippine University. So anyways, hopefully someone can help me out with that. But basically in 1995, David Kaczynski sees a quote printed on page 56 of the manifesto, and he basically recognizes the quote from his brother. And I think that's how Ted Kaczynski ends up getting turned in. Ted Kaczynski is found living in a cabin in the woods for 25 years. And if I'm messing any of this up, I apologize. The point necessarily isn't for me to get everything right here on this kind of information, though I was trying my best. It's really just to get into the philosophy of what these people are into. So the second interview is with this guy, basically Brockman's friend and client, Stuart Brand. And I guess he coined the term personal computer. He's a musician, and he was in the 60s, he was a hippie, and he released this Whole Earth catalog project. And it turns consciousness into an open system and an alternative form of cybernetics. Stuart Brand was one of the guys that was with Ken Kesey and the Merry Pranksters, and he rolled with that, rolled in that scene. There at the time you have this like computer, LSD, and hippies coming together. And of course, Ken Kesey is a guinea pig for the government, and he's the one that takes the bus across America, and it's got the Merry Pranksters in it. It's got musicians in it. The Warlocks were in it, who ended up becoming the Grateful Dead. And what's crazy is the Merry Pranksters, again, the dude that showed me all the stuff on Molly, he was part of the Merry Prankster, lineage. And like he said, he was conceived on acid. Not that I think that was something for him that was kind of solidifying who he was, what he was born into. And that's why I know he felt the need to share it. I'm pretty sure, if I remember correctly, his family ended up becoming Christians, and he definitely is not a Christian and thinks all religions are the same. And so it was just, I guess it was just interesting to see. Supposedly his parents had kind of moved on from that lifestyle, but he was keeping up with it. Really, it was all of this is just kind of in the name of research, right? And in this Whole Earth catalog project, it was all about computer and tech, but there was also like a build a house in nature part of it, and like an anti-tech part of this catalog, which basically taught you how to build a house in the woods, right? And Ted Kaczynski's manifesto, a revolt against the industrial system, this idea that science and tech will destroy the freedom of the individual, and you won't be able to hide from mind control or surveillance. And so in this system, like nature is like is the biggest solution, right? And So Ted Kaczynski is obviously, it kind of fell into the anti-tech part of life for the later part of his life, but which is crazy because I think when he was 16, it said he had a 170 IQ. I mean, he went to Harvard, was a mathematician, obviously a really, really smart guy. In this documentary, the whole time, Lutz is writing someone, and so that's part of the scenes are like some montage of different sceneries and him traveling, and it's a letter being read to him. And at the end of the movie, spoiler alert, at the end of the movie, you find out that the person who has been writing him is Ted Kaczynski. I'm pretty sure it was Ted that's saying in this letter, like, utopias are dangerous, especially tech ones that involve tech. Tech systems need merely adapt human behavior to its own demands so that it can function and expand itself. Okay. Again, it's this kind of concept that, like, at one point when you put the pilot in the plane, that he becomes one with the plane. But then there's a point in all of this with technology where actually the plane takes over him. So it merely adapts human behavior to its own demands so it can function and expand itself. I don't know if I'm saying that exactly right, but the idea that the tech system just needs merely adapt human behavior to its own demands. So all it needs to do is get human behavior to rely on its own demands so it can function and then expand itself. So the more reliant humans are on technology, the easier it will be for technology to function and expand itself. All the published versions of the manifesto are incorrect, containing serious errors. Yeah, okay, so now this takes us back to the 1940s. Basically, it didn't happen until after the World War II, but there is this guy, Norbert Werner. Basically, he invents, I'm pretty sure it's just a radar system that detects movement from other planes in advance. So, like, this is kind of the nature of tech warfare. He makes sure, like, on the radar system, whatever it is that's coming up, it's just like a little bloop, bloop. So, like, it's people, it's ships, it's planes, but it's just like this abstract blip on the radar screen. Just enough to where the boundary between man and machine gets blurred. What emerges is a mechanized, anonymous opponent whose actions can be modeled in war labs. You're right. When you don't have to, I mean, it's the same thing with now all of just the social media stuff. Now everyone is kind of like the boundaries between man and machine get blurred. And it's like, there is this kind of anonymous opponent element to our interactions now. Even though it's not anonymous, you still don't have to, like, deal with it face to face. And oh my gosh, it would just be like, we would be stronger for doing it face to face. Yeah, but out with the old and in with the new, right? I mean, that is the old man that had to do it face to face. Now it's interface to interface. And we become that much more removed from any kind of a persona. We are now just like tech. We're just tech fighting tech. So I'm pretty sure this was Lutz talking here, and he says, man now appears to be no more than an information processing system. Thought is data processing, and the brain is a machine made of flesh. The brain no longer is a place where ego and identity and mystery are created through memory and consciousness. It's a machine consisting of switching and controlling circuits, feedback loops, communication nodes, a black box where cause is effect and effect is cause within an infinite cycle, a closed feedback system with input and output that can be controlled and calculated, no longer, as previously, starting out from the contemplation of nature, but from indisputable mathematics and logic. Again, indisputable mathematics and logic. Those are the idols in this so far. One of them. Again, it's like, here are the things that we are worshiping with this worldview: mathematics, logic, the process of transferring and sending information. Those would be our gods. And then the systems and tools in which we will bow down to and report to here in the future. There's a part of me that thinks, oh, we're going to get peace as soon as we die. And then and maybe we do get peace, but we don't get inside information as to how it's going to go for our relatives. But we will still have peace about however it goes for our relatives. So it's a crazy thought. I guess what I'm talking about is just a crazy thing to think about your great-great-grandkids or your grandkids, just them being a part of the rapture, or them being here when things get crazy for Christians, when Christians start really getting persecuted. I mean, I know a lot of people say it's going to happen in the next 10 years. And the more I hear about 2030, the more I'm like, yeah, we should all be, not necessarily from a rapture standpoint, but just from a geopolitical standpoint and a spiritual warfare standpoint, 2030 seems to be like an important year. Which would make sense because I'm thinking like 2020, they primed the wheels, right? They know exactly what they're doing as far as let's give people 10 years to kind of heal from that, and then boom, hit them with something. And there's going to be enough residual trauma from that for it to like re-kick everybody back to where they were 10 years ago. So what are we putting our faith and hope in that has nothing to do with what the elite are trying to get us to believe in? And again, the elite want us in the cybernetics concept and the AI concept. They want to take all of our beliefs and amalgamate it into its own thing that will be what tells us, again, how to run our lives. So this guy basically building the radar system and making us, at least with a gun, you got to look at your enemy in the face, even if it's far away in a scope. Now you don't, or yeah, you don't even, you don't even have to see the person. And it's gotten even worse since then. So would you like if people lived in a virtual world, or if machines were smarter than humans? If future people, animals, and plants were part of tech? And yeah, okay, so this is all great questions. Would you like to live in a virtual world? If machines were smarter than humans, would we like this? What do we mean by smarter than humans? Sure, they can be more precise in like a procedural setting. Sure, machines can make things a little bit easier to measure and calculate and produce and all these things. And so in a way, they're smart, but they get their smarts from us. And so then now you're saying that if machines were smarter than humans, there would have to be some sort of a thing, transcendent thing about them that made, from the Christian worldview, humans are a part of an open system already, a system in which God created, and he can penetrate, and the system is open, so he can interject or penetrate or do anything he wants to that's new. He can create anything new at any time he wants because this is an open system. In a way, that's where some of the tribal mentality, the tribes got it right? With the Yil Bangura, the thing knowledge can't eat. Knowledge will never be able to eat Christ. Christ is not just the story. He's not just information. He transcends information. He transcends creation. So this idea that AI is going to take the Bible and the Tao Te Ching and all these different books and fables, again, like I was saying, like astrotheology, where it just combines everything, language, fables, astrology, Eastern practices. I mean, everything, all is Adam. This is what astrotheology does. It just takes it all and combines it together, right? So the times of the day are connected to the signs in astrology. So I think like 6 a.m. to 8 a.m. is Ram. I used to study this stuff, and it's been a while since I've even thought about it. But either way, it connects all of these things together. What's crazy is they're hijacking. They don't get it, but they're literally the thing that makes humans special and even gives us, they're hijacking God's power through us by getting us to worship this. I mean, yeah, it's crazy. Technology is now the new golden statue. It's like the golden statues have come to life now. and they're moving and speaking, and now we've given them a consciousness. And I mean, it's the same thing that any spiritual being trying to control a certain principality would be doing. Let me get everyone here to sacrifice babies to me. Let me control the narrative of what's going on here and get people to believe in that over something that allows them to be actually free. Isn't it crazy that God gives us that freedom to just think about all this stuff when everyone else just wants to tell you exactly how to think, or wants you to submit to something that's going to tell you how to think? Again, when Forbes or whatever, these magazines started to come out during COVID that said, don't do your own research, trust the specialists. And dang, man, I just go, if we, like the internet when I was 16 in like 99, 98 or whatever, God, that seems like a chill. It just seems so basic, so simple compared to where our kids will, what my kids will see. Like the internet, my kids will see is like, you don't even know what you can trust. And I know it was similar. That was similar to what we had growing up. You didn't know what who you could trust or what information you could trust. But now it's truly, for Malachi's generation, they will be under attack. Their identity, who they are and what they've done, and the truth about them will be under attack their whole lives. And so this idea of like who we trust and everything, I mean, it's just gonna become more necessary, and it's going to be more strategic, because I can't even imagine it was almost like technology, like the enemy needed technology, because back in the day, it was like you'd hear about some mystical story where it'd be like, Malachi, it's your mom. And he's like, Mom, is that you? And he's like, he doesn't know quite where he's going, and that he's actually running towards something that's mimicking his voice, that's leading him to danger. And it's like, I wouldn't be surprised if that's how certain evil spirits had worked in the past. But now we have enough evil spirits controlling people's intentions or steering people's intentions into corrupt ways. And now we're creating the technology that we would need to be like, Malachi, it's your mom. And then it's really creepy, but it's true. Like, what are we going to, he's only going to be able to trust me because he's been with me and he's seen me. So I don't know. I don't know how far. Again, I would love Jesus to come back sooner than later. I don't think it matters. I don't think ultimately, like, we have won and we have victory. So whether we have millions of more people or not, God's kingdom seems to be, it is up to him when we've hit the limit, right? We're not in charge of the shot clock here. So then they brought up, okay. Again, this idea that all future people, animals, plants were products of tech, CRISPR, the gene modifying thing. I mean, it is going to be nuts because, right, you take all this stuff and you use it as like, a gun is for self-defense. Oh, well, we need self-defense. CRISPR is for people who have like autism or something. I don't know, who have like, we can modify some gene in them. We put something in and now their arm grows right or something like that. You're like, yeah, that makes sense. Neuralink is for people who have lost their memory or, who have severe depression or whatever. I don't know, PTSD or whatever. It's like, okay, that's cool. Now it works with those people. But you see, and it's the same thing with therapy. Therapy is a tool and a technology to help us heal and relax. And it's like, you can see how, hey, we'll start with just a little bit here so that you can take some deep breaths and lighten the load. And then all of a sudden you end up in, Burning Man orgy land. So people think when we will be able to, if this is possible, when we will be able to use an artificial womb and have babies artificially for the most part. I mean, what would be crazy, right, is there already someone who's trying to figure out how to make sperm? There's got to be. There's got to be people who are trying to make an artificial egg and artificial sperm, which is insane. Insane. And for now, maybe I'll write it down. There's just certain things that are just too scary for me. I don't even want to think about what happens if we have some sort of artificial sperm and egg. And then it's like, because still it is this inquiry into consciousness and how information travels through our minds. And information is immaterial in our minds, and then it becomes material. And like you write up the menu in your head, and then you have to put it on some substrate, which happens to be the piece of paper that you print the information on, or whatever you type the information on. So yeah, I don't even, what is consciousness again? And then does salvation happen? Is salvation faster than the speed of light? Right, because I think that's what quantum physics is. It's can we eventually send information faster than the speed of light? It's crazy that there's a God that's already he's all knowing. So the information he created every little bit of information that there is. He already saw it coming. I mean, as far as a quantum processing system, everything it's just crazy how God is everything that they are trying to be. So let's see. Okay, so then they built like the Sage, which is the largest computer ever made, and it was like a radar. It was a giant radar thing, and it could launch missiles from ground, and it was a decentralized network. And then this kind of gets into the ARPANET. So ARPA is the Advanced Research Project. So they come up with the ARPANET, and basically ARPA is like at first it's space related, and it's because of what happened with Sputnik. Sputnik was during the Cold War, and basically the Soviet Union pretty much shocked the United States by successfully launching the first orbiting satellite. Yeah, and so until that moment, we had felt protected by our technological superiority, right? And then this happened, and so we were like, wait a second, we never want that to happen again. And so then that's when the Advanced Research Project gets put into place, and so that is like 1958. But I think the ARPANET is in the 70s. I'm not 100% sure, but in 1960, ARPA gets kind of merged with NASA. At first, it's for like rocket engineering and the Defense Department. The ARPANET, it enabled people in different places who had a common interest to share those interests, right? So ARPA for like 61 to 62, they just did computer research. They were trying to get like how to connect the computer to a network. Basically, the internet is the evolution of ARPA in both philosophy and tech. And then the first internet was in 1975, like 1976. And they basically combined the Ethernet with the ARPANET. So the ARPANET arose from a desire to share information over great distances without the need for dedicated phone connections between each computer on a network. Fulfilling this desire would require packet switching. So it allowed different kinds of computers on different networks to talk to each other. ARPANET and the Defense Data Network officially changed to the TCP/IP standard on January 1st, 1983, hence the birth of the internet. All networks could now be connected by a universal language. So yeah, the ARPANET began in 1966. Several standards were developed. Network Control Program would handle communication between hosts and could support the first commands, the Telenet and the File Transfer Protocol, the FTP. It would use packet switching technology to communicate. I don't know what any of that means, I'm not going to lie. Still pretty interesting. Still stuff to keep researching. Let's move on. So I think somehow they're trying to come up with like you remember like in shows or games or anything like that, where like you hit the bad guy and then the bad guy learns your moves as you do them on him. So even it could be like, you shoot fire at him and it hits him, and all of a sudden now he can shoot fire. So the thing they're trying to build is it turns every attack and disruption into an energy source with which to perfect itself. Yeah, so it turns every attack and disruption into an energy source in which to protect itself. And why would we need this, and who would make it? Yeah, that's what the guy asked. And it is true. I mean, it's like I could see us creating something that only Jesus could, destroy. That's why I said Revelation and the beast and the head, cutting off the heads and all these different things. I mean, it's like sounding more and more like technology. And what's even crazier to me is that even despite all the technological advancements, like when you hear about the imagery in the Bible, it's gonna be way more mind blowing than anything AI could create, and it's gonna feel way more. It's gonna feel viscerally different and distinct. So the next thing they got into in the documentary was they brought up the Macy's conferences, and these went on between 1946 and 1953. And they were secret meetings. Some of the CIA was there. The point of the conference was to develop a science that makes it possible to predict and control human behavior. This was a weapon that America needed in the Cold War, in the new battlefield of the subconscious. The battlefield of the subconscious, this is why our spiritual practices, our religious practices become so important, because they are kind of like the force field in which we can set a foundation that allows us to navigate things should we become confused, because basically because our subconscious is so lock and step that we're on solid ground almost, because the subconscious is, because of the lack of awareness we have around our subconscious, this makes it the easiest entry point. And iniquity is really what we should be looking at in this situation, meaning we really should be looking at the accountability that God holds our thoughts to, or that the level of accountability in which we even our thoughts are held to. And, if you even look at a woman with lust, you've committed adultery in your heart. If you've even, if you hate your brother, if you say, I hate my brother, it's like you've committed murder. And it's crazy that God is trying to hold us to this radical standard now, because literally what we have next is, or in the future, is humans trying to engineer something that will be able to predict, like in Minority Report, it will predict that intention in you. Sometimes you're not going to do something until the second before you do it, right? In those moments, I just think it's so wild, because there's no way of proving emphatically that you were in fact going to do the thing that you thought you were going to do. Yeah, but anyways, okay, so the point of these conferences, right? Who would even think to make it possible to predict and control human behavior, and predominantly through the battlefield of the subconscious? I mean, this just sounds so much like, Luciferian practices or Luciferian tactics. Okay, so next it goes into the Frankfurt Institute. These couple guys, Max Horkheimer, great last name, Horkheimer, and Theodore A. Adorno, they write this study called The Authoritarian Personality. It's basically a social profile of the USA aimed to give a scientific explanation for religious and radical prejudice. Tendencies towards fascism, racism, and Jews can be tracked and explained. And this kind of introduces social theory. So he said, this matrix is shaped through education and tradition, and it is apparently indissolubly linked to a metaphysical notion of the supernatural created nature. And then, so the sociologists created an F scale, fascism scale, basically, and other things. And they measured the fascists' potential. So, and this American psychologist, Henry A. Murray, was the father of this assessment center. They were using like the latest psychological processes to track personality and tendencies. To get rid of fascism and anti-Semitism, it seems necessary to alter the nature of man and his underlying culture patterns so that the authoritarian matrix would be eradicated forever. Is matrix just like possibility? I guess I don't really understand matrix. Like, how are you altering man so certain ones and zeros don't exist? Like, how can you take out the potential? If it's all ones and zeros, how are we altering the ones and zeros so that it could never do that again? But I mean, again, whew. I mean, this is just so crazy, right? To get rid of the fascism and anti-Semitism, it seems necessary to alter the nature of man. Well, no shit. It's just crazy that how they're trying to go about altering it. Proving the point that there are certain standards that we all should live by even more, and begging the question, where did those standards come from? I love like a good, like, thinking hard, overthinking, feeling. Because it's like, I guess it's not overthinking. I mean, they're thinking the right amount. It's just, again, what they're grounding their thoughts in and where their hope lies, what they put their faith in. I mean, again, this all ties into the same stuff that critical race theory type stuff. I mean, it's all the same like stuff, right? And what makes these guys more right than any like Christian theologian and philosopher and scientist? I mean, that's why it's such a race for power for them. So basically, this is what they're asking, and this is, again, what the guy said. How is it possible ruling out some bloody procedure to penetrate deep into a person's consciousness with the aim of changing it? I mean, come on, man. You think people are playing games out here, right? I mean, until you really, really get exactly how twisted people are. Wise as a serpent, soft as a dove, and then you learn about this and you're like, oh my gosh, like, this is literally the serpent mentality. Penetrating deep into a person's consciousness with the aim of changing it. And that's exactly what the snake did in the garden. So this is just the furthering of that agenda. And this is a saying from someone in the Macy group. They said, old values and balance must be destroyed in order to make conditions fluid. Fluid. Where has that word been coming up lately? Let me start this over. Old values and balance must be destroyed in order to make conditions fluid. In order to, it needs to self-regulate. Re-education will develop into self-re-education. Transform the world into a post-national, multi-ethnic, global society with no fixed borders. The Macy's Group offers the blueprint for the New World Order. Newer and faster computers, system theory and model cybernetic worlds, with which it appears possible to control and direct all scientific, culture, and political spheres. This also promises the programming of the new people, anti-authoritarian people, made to measure. Gotcha, bitch. Blind faith, man. Blind faith. Social engineering. Mind control, programming. I mean, they got our number, man. They got, go get your shots, wear your mask. I mean, the Great Reset is, again, they did such a good job. I mean, so many of us. And guess what was crazy is I was like, oh, well, shit, I'll take the money. You know what I'm saying? That's how much we're thriving here on Earth. Okay, well, I guess I'll take the money. Like we all just were like 2 weeks. Okay, sure. Yeah. Like nothing we could do about it. No one thought we could do anything about it. Sure. Some people didn't wear masks and some people kept going to work and some businesses stayed open, but come on. I mean, like there was what happened, right? And then if we're not all at least asking each other, yo, what just happened? If we don't take the time to process this in 10 years, it's gonna hurt us even more. So if you're 16 now, your 26-year-old self will thank you. If you're 30 now, your 40-year-old self will thank you. You know, if you're 40, your 50-year-old self will thank you if you just take some time to process like what is going on and how do we create something? How do you create something in yourself that allows you to stand up and think for yourself, to think for yourself and stand up for what you believe in, and not this stuff that you're catching on the internet, but the stuff that you're actually consuming in your day-to-day life with your relationships with your parents and friends. So yeah, the blueprint for the new world order, newer and faster computers. Yay, give me that 5G. System theory and model cybernetic worlds. So yeah, just AI, analyzing systems, analyzing us, analyzing data. What will we call it? Like what is, I've talked about the database with all of our information. It's like a grave. It's just like, I don't know. It's some kind of a graveyard, but it's also not. I mean, it's graveyard because we're all dead and they've got all this information on us again, but it's all there for the AI to analyze over and over and over and over again. So everything will be able to be continually built upon, and it will just be, well, that's what's so interesting is all these people who have such that's why I think it's a race for power, because all these people who have here we're like, no one wants to bow to a god, like I want to be in control of my own life. And then all of a sudden we're going to be, we're not going to be, like instead of bowing to a god, it literally is going to be like the biblical times. Like I said, like we're going to bow down to the golden statue, only these golden statues are AI systems. And it's like, okay, fine. You don't want to worship a god. You're going to worship this. And guess what? You thought God was bad. You trusted the wrong part of man. That's, there's a part of man that knows he's wrong and can put his belief in God. And then there's the part of man that just doesn't even like the way that sounds and rather just lean on his own understanding. So yeah, tell me on the newer, faster computers. I don't know. Like I said, I could care. At some point I could care less if the relationships go, if our identity is wiped out as individuals and it doesn't even matter. No, I really rather not have the technology. Walking down the road to the well to get water as myself feels so much better than fucking swiping my chip at the gate to get on the spaceship to fly off planet Earth for a field day, in the sky. And then I come back and it's like, okay, I scan again and I go back to my quarters where I'm being surveillanced and we can't grow food or anything like that. We're just, everything is going to be taken care of for us. And it's going to be sold to us as it's going to feel good. I mean, think about how terrible Coca-Cola is for you and how much of a vibe it is. I mean, they've just done such a good job of spinning that into a treat that we need. Again, when does therapy turn into demonic play? Like lots of delicious things to drink. Do you need to have 40 grams of sugar in a fizzy brown drink that, no, it's like that. We could think of better things. Especially for us as a world to like get behind of all the drinks, they've just done a good job, right? The programming, they've done a good job. So all this stuff with which it appears possible to control and direct all scientific, culture, and political spheres. This also promises the programming of the new people, an anti-authoritarian people made to measure. Again, C.S. Lewis's The Abolition of Men. You don't need a backbone. There's no need for courage or bravery. Don't do your own research. Don't put your faith in the Bible. What are you, a caveman? And we're just like, oh, well, you're right. Like everyone is right in their own way. No hate coming from me. I don't want to try to lead anybody. I just want to be led. You imagine what that's going to do for like, laugh. But I mean, it's just going to ruin you take that desire away from man to lead. And I just go, yeah, what's the point of living if you're not going to lead your family? What's the honor? Where's the honor in living if you're not going to be the leader of your family? And what's the point of being the leader of your family if you're not going to be the best leader of your family? And what does it mean to be the best leader? Well, it means that you're taking on the responsibility of the upkeep that it takes in all the areas of life, from emotional to physical to safety to values. What are you going to die for? What are you going to kill for? That's being a good leader. Let me just give all of that responsibility that really is one of the greatest honors in life, to create life and be responsible for what you create. And let's go ahead and let's give that honor and responsibility to someone else, to something else that's not even alive, that's been created by a small group of us that presumably knew what was best for us. And again, because we didn't because we read the magazine and we're like, oh yeah, like if we didn't do research, how would we even know to believe in what they're saying? Us reading the cover of that magazine that says to not do your own research and to just listen to the specialists, guess what? That's considered research for a lot of people. You might think they're just reading it for pleasure or whatever, but no, that very well can be considered research. So you're telling us, okay, to do research, to find out we shouldn't do research. It's a self-defeating thought. And again, if you are that, that's the other thing. I just think if you're that mentally, if you're that discombobulated mentally to the point where you just are thinking in circles, then that would make sense that you're shooting for this infinity sign. But a cross goes up and down forever, and it goes left and right forever. Open system. It's crazy, again, the people who are, their philosophy is to promote the self, how it always falls into self-defeating logic. And it's just crazy how that always works. That it's just built in that way. Like you are putting yourself first, and you're always going to be self-defeated at that point. So a utopia, which makes it possible the creation of a society according to a specific ideal design, forces utopias on each other. Whose utopia is right? How do we know? Or are we supposed to just do trial and error like we've done everything else? Well, how is that any better of a system than any other system that's ever existed? Oh, we're the ones dictating the intent of our ancestors? All of them? Oh yeah, we knew what they were all feeling. We were there. We've got all the information we need. We know what was going on in George Washington's heart. Whose utopia are we voting for? We'll just have like Elon Musk, and then we'll have Jeff Bezos, and we could just do like kind of like a Survivor, or we could do like a Hunger Games for those guys though, and they're competing for us. But I mean, ethically, as far as this, the ideal design, according to a specific ideal design, whose ideal design? This is why we have certain checks and balance systems in place right now. Even the body of Christ works as its own organism. Isn't that insane that the Bible is already using language like this when you think about all these systems that are being put in place and some sort of a scientific mind, and we'll create this kind of organism around it. And we already work that way as people. But again, supposedly this thing's going to take all of that into consideration for us. Okay, so this is where it gets a little more interesting. There's this esotericism center on the coast of California. They start doing more Macy's conferences in the 70s with the concept of this new spirituality with the help of cybernetics and drugs. And then, of course, the popularization of the Macy's vision as they're getting bigger and bigger. So then Stuart Brand and Brockman, they're like gurus of the avant-garde, and they team up with Buckminster Fuller and John Cage, and cybernetics and systems theories reach the international networks of the bohemian world, and so acquire a different non-military aura, right? So now their ideals, or this idea is seeping more and more into culture, right? And that's a part of the kind of like rewiring process is the spread of this information. Right. So now you have it's reached the hippies, it's reached Woodstock, and it's reached all the artists and everything. So then there's another dude, Heinz von Forster, and he's a part of the Vienna Circles, which was a bunch of like the early the early prophets of cybernetics. And they were lectures on system theory. And in 1953, Forster became the secretary of the Macy's conferences. He has access to the inner circles of the American scientific elite, a pioneer of the theory of constructivism, which says human beings construct their own reality. There's no objective reality that exists independent of the observer. That works in the sense if there was no creator, but if there is someone observing us, then the reality exists solely on dependently on the thing observing us. Obviously, if there is a creator God, he is also our observer. A creator personal God, I should say, yes, then he is our observer as well. Constructivism is another great way of where the enemy just works in through our imagination and our subconscious to just lay pipeline down for, to run his message and propaganda through. Yeah, again, this idea that we construct our own reality and that it's only subjectivism. But again, it just leads into self-defeating concepts again, like the idea that there's no such thing as objective truth, which that's an objectively true statement to say. So sure, then let's just say if that's then objectively true, in what other ways is objective truth true? Forrester gets his own research lab and computer lab, and he's commissioned to do research for the U.S. and the Navy and the Air Force. Basically, he's working on like the merging of a digital and biological system. And he himself, Forrester, never owned a computer because he thought he was a more sophisticated machine, which, I mean, at the time for sure. And then even in certain ways, I mean, I think there will always, I was talking with Zane about this last night, and it's kind of like what Sly in the Family Stone said about people sampling his music. The interviewer was like, what do you think about people sampling your music? And Sly was like, oh, I want to sample them sampling me. And Zane brought up the point where now there's like this kid that's drumming, and he grew up listening to just like Ableton beats, right? And just like kind of that like staccato just rhythm. And now there's this kid that's basically able to do a computer style drums, but better and with more dynamic than the computer can. So how will man continue to separate himself from technology, but technology continue to push man to grow? So then this is Forrester. There's an interview, and he looks gnarly. I mean, he's older, and but his like just the gaze out of his eyes is so intense. And okay, so and I'm gonna try and get this the best I can. So he said, what does science derive from? The Indo-European word ciencia is the word SCI, so psi, and that is found in science and in schizophrenia and in schism, the word meaning to separate. Systemic is a parallel development, only it's the exact opposite of science, for it integrates. All this system theory and systems research, which crops up in both art and science, I wouldn't call that science anymore. I would call it systemics. Science has moved on to an approach that sees things together, systemics, which is crazy, right? Because now basically systemics means there's science at least relates with like law, like the law of nature, and it almost relates more with objective truth than systemics, because all this system theory and systems research, which crops up is in both art and science, would not be called science anymore. It would be called systemic. Science has moved on to an approach that sees things together. So it's really like it's this universal outlook on the whole world, that somehow all of this stuff all ties together into its own universal system. And that is the meaning of it. Is just the fact that it works and all connects. That's the meaning of it. Is what is the meaning of life? Well, that all systems work together universally. That creates this universal collective mind and shared experience. And it's like, well, what's the point of that? Well, to share the experience, you just say, again, you're just going to keep repeating yourself. Then he says, what is metaphysics? There are questions among those we ask about the world that it is possible to answer, or you can ask questions that cannot be answered. Origin of the universe, I could give you 35 theories, astrologers, Big Bang, the Christian God. So many theories, the questions can't be answered. It's more relevant someone invents to explain the origin of the universe. It is a competition between the best creators of interesting theorists. So interesting that everyone immediately thinks that's what must have happened. I could give you 35 theories of the origin of the universe, and somehow AI is going to take into account all 35 theories of the universe, or all however many people who have their own individual theory. And this is why I talked about the other day, what happens if there's a good AI or a bad AI, or like where all of a sudden there's more. What if Christianity is still the predominant religion across the world when there is AI? What are they going to do then? That's got to be the only reason why they got to get rid of us, right? Because if it's all about the collective mind, and these people who create this system are outnumbered by the Christians, let's just say, are outnumbered by Christians, so they know they're going to get beat to begin with. If 70% of the world is Christian, I'm not saying that's the number now, I'm just giving an example. If 60% of the world is Christian, then the AI system essentially is going to function more in favor of Christians. And it's crazy because somehow they're going to want to get... We're trying to build something that's so sophisticated that it's not going to be a biased system, and it's just going to be the thing that confirms what we already knew about ourselves and everything that we built, right? That this shit is already happening. And it has more to do with the fact that we live in a fallen world than anything. It has more to do with just the depravity of man than anything. But we'll rest assured because we believed in ourselves. At least these guys. He says, these days there's so much data that it is no longer possible to include all the different data in your story. And then artificial data is invented, for example, particles. Then particles are invented that do whatever it is we don't understand. So in my opinion, particles are always solutions to problems that we cannot solve any other way. That is, they are inventions to help to explain certain problems. And that's the biggest critique of the Bible by people like this, is that it was an invention. It was invented by men to control men. We will come up with a better system. Yeah, it is. That is just the craziest thing to say. Again, the faith it takes to believe in particles, and again, believing in creation rather than the creator. And then everyone wants to act like, again, it's just this self-defeating, not taking responsibility for how things are really looking kind of mentality that I see in this whole worldview. All these guys, we'll just put our faith in what we don't know, but as long as it's on an equal level with on some level what we are, we will be fine. It's only just creation looking at creation. But yeah, again, this not taking responsibility for, let's just say, like the artificial data is invented, for example, particles, then particles are invented to do whatever it is we don't understand. It's just nuts. A particle becomes God. That is insane to me. Then the particles are invented to do whatever we don't understand. Okay, well, now we're back to Greek philosophy. The lightning god, the god of the electrical particle. And they shit on Christianity. They shit on God. It's crazy. Like, just even the concept. Like, obviously, they don't even really believe in him, but just conceptually, they just, like, they don't even care. I don't know what it would be like to feel that superior. Intellectually, I should say. You know, like, there's been times where, on a scale of competition, I know, I guess, on a certain level, what it's like to kind of rank higher in competition, but never in a way in which I really thought the people I was beating were, the people I was competing against or beating were dumber than me. For me to think on some level that an atheist is dumb, I'm like, it's not even, it's true to a certain level, but it's also not true, because it's like they're still using amazing logic and reasoning and all these faculties given to them by God in order to come up with what they're doing. And it's like, even for someone to do that, I go, man, God they might not recognize it, but I at least can see in them that some people who have great morals and a big heart and all these things, it's like, I can appreciate all of that stuff. I don't have to sit there and be like, you guys are idiots because you don't believe in what I believe. No, I can look at you and say, wow, that is crazy. How did you come to that conclusion? That's amazing. How have you been living your life? How have you been dealing with things? Well, look at that smile on your face. What gives you peace at night? Let's see, what else is next? He says, okay, say there's a hole in my theory, one I can gloss over. So I just say, look, here are some new particles that are either green, yellow, or I don't know what. They replace the hole in my theory. Every particle is an answer to a question that we cannot answer. And that is how the enemy works. Let me give you an answer without a real answer to ground any of your questioning in. I have my doubts about God, but they're way more like, I know they're a question, that it doesn't register as much as doubt anymore, because God always comes up with the answer for me in time if I'm patient. And it's crazy because the level of stability you have to ground your reasoning in the alpha and the omega, the beginning and the end, it's a sturdy foundation. Psychedelics leave you asking more questions. I'm not saying the Bible doesn't get you to ask more questions, but what I'm saying is you have to look at the ratio of which you're feeling peace, and you have to be able to gauge the kind of peace that you're having. Is this true peace or artificial peace? How dependent are you on something, a part of creation, anything else besides your spiritual practice or your relationship with Jesus, I should say? How dependent are you on anything else besides just your relationship with Jesus? Because what you're choosing to ground all of this stuff in is what you're choosing to put your trust in. So whatever you're putting your trust in to ground your worldview, how much peace is it bringing you? And where do you rate on a level of peace and compare? I mean, like, do you see people potentially embodying more peace than you? Do you see people in stressful situations and situations in which would normally stress you out and give you anxiety? And do you see other people dealing with it in a way in which you go, wow, that's dang, they actually look like they're enjoying that. That's weird. And what is it that they're on that's allowing them to enjoy those situations, that allows them to enjoy those situations that actually you can do every day and create a sustainable routine and model for living your life off of? Those are the kinds of things, when you find something, the sturdy foundation, this whole thing of a particle is not a sturdy foundation, obviously. And every particle is the answer to a question that we cannot answer. There's only one thing that can answer that question. So what about basically growing infinity on theories that have holes, the interviewer asks. Like, he says, are all good stories on such shaky foundation? And Forrester says, yeah. And he says, well, in the worldwide functioning system of machines, all theories are correct. Again, here we go. Now we're starting to describe what the infinite sign looks like. And of course, that's what a lot of people want. And why are they correct? Because they can all be deduced from other theories and stories. It goes on deducing infinitely. No limits, not at all. That's the good thing about it. You can go on forever. And then the interviewer says, in logic? And he says, yes, precisely. And then the interviewer says, but in reality? And then Forrester says, what is reality? Can you show it to me? Great questions. But this idea that the functioning system of machines across the world, all theories are correct. So again, they're only correct in relationship to themselves. They're only correct in the way in which they all kind of are saying something similar. Again, we're getting rid of objective truth altogether. So now all religions are true in the ways that they overlap. And in the areas in which more things overlap, that's how we determine what is this new standard of pretty much objective truth. But it's an artificial version of objective truth. It's our own understanding of how objective truth works, as opposed to God's understanding. Okay, so now it gets back into Ted Kaczynski. So they're kind of painting the picture again that between art, multimedia, science, and technology, there's an agenda forming, right? And a lot of it has to do with mind control. I can't force enough how, well, one, Jesus protects our subconscious. So we don't have to be in fear, but two, how the imagination and the subconscious is the entry point for the enemy, is a great entry point for the enemy. Matter of fact, he can set up, camp, so to speak, in certain areas before you even notice it. So when we talk about honing and channeling our greatest strength and weakness on the podcast, this is kind of what we're talking about as well. It's like, how do we create awareness around our periphery as much as we can? Subconscious is always going to be doing its thing, but how do we create more awareness around that so that we can kind of see any sort of enemy building any sort of anything in our worldview? By creating this awareness, we can kind of at least begin to address it. So back to Ted Kaczynski, he tested again in college as a highly gifted male college student. They created this personality test for these guys. They created a personality structure to kind of fit all these people into to track personality traits. Ted Kaczynski was a part of these studies, and a lot of the documents, I think all of the documents and everything from these studies have been, they're no longer there, but they got rid of them, but they videotaped all of them. So I would imagine, they got rid of all that evidence. And so a little bit more about Ted Kaczynski. Everyone was given a code name. His code name was Lawful. And this was, 1957, him and 20 other students all started doing these tests, right? And the tests screwed them up. They were giving them large amounts of acid and and who knows what else they were doing. It is insane, right? Because when you look at what footage you do have some of these tests, it's definitely not the place in which you want to be tripping. I mean, it would have been one thing to do these tests, like this guy does, like Henry A. Murray. He's kind of the director of these tests. And eventually he starts tripping on his own, I believe it's with Timothy Leary, and they're on some like beautiful estate. So it's crazy that they've got all these guinea pigs on some level that they do like lab rats. And then they've got like the Kinkeezy, folk who are out there in the world and doing their thing. But just the people who are in the lab rat environments, oh my gosh, that just seems like hell. Yeah, so, well, let me back up a little bit here. So this was in 1957, and in 1971, Ted Kaczynski resigns. He was teaching at Berkeley, and that's when he builds his cabin in the woods. And remember, there was that Stuart Brand's, I think it was Industrial Society and its Future, and it was the world Earth, the Whole Earth Catalog Project. In that, again, they talked about the anti-tech section that they had in that catalog, which was how to build a house, right? So now Ted Kaczynski is like, all right, well, I'm anti-tech. I'm going to go build a house. And they basically said that, he reached a limit beyond which there was only paranoia or truth, which is the scariest thing, because so many times I feel like the Holy Spirit does a good job of keeping me safe. I mean, sometimes I take on too much information. I'm like, God, that was disgusting. And, especially with a lot of the child trafficking stuff and just everything that was coming out over COVID and so many things, right? You can just get, right? You could just reach a level where you feel nauseous, right? And it's like, I'm so grateful for the Holy Spirit in those moments. I'm so grateful that I can kind of re-interject myself into life as I've known it, and I can go work out, I can go to church, I can spend time with my family, and then I can kind of get back to the truth on some level in my own time. And again, that's God's grace, allowing us to do that. And so wise as a serpent, soft as a dove, and us finding that restoration and peace in the stillness of life, in the ordinary things of life, but definitely in the quiet stillness alone with Jesus. And so, like I could not imagine if I got so far out there and I knew so much or whatever who knows what they did with him? Because a lot of the studies, a lot of what they're doing is in a lot of the MK Ultra mind control stuff, right? It's like, it is that kind of stuff like the Manchurian Candidate or like Will Ferrell's character in Zoolander, where they're programming these people to act. They've given them a different person. They've embedded them with a different personality in their subconscious that lies dormant until they trigger it by some code word. And to this day, Ted Kaczynski denies being the Unabomber, which is just crazy to me. I could see him just denying it to deny it. I'm not saying I couldn't see that, but all I'm saying is there a chance that he didn't know that he didn't do it? And I don't think that's the case, because he was out in the woods making bombs. I mean, he had all these different shelters where he was making bombs. But this idea that he reached this level of paranoia or truth, and he was, there was no middle ground of there was no comfort. Let's just put it that way. There was no comfort for him. I think those tests he saw the future and their intention, and it was demonic, It's like, now you're like paranoid, because you're just almost like, am I up against a demon? I can imagine how it also can get scary with what is truth? Anyways, but so the CIA cleared these drug tests, and Henry Murray, he directed the test. He's the co-founder of the Department of Social Relations at Harvard. He developed systems to study leadership qualities of the officers of the Department of Psychological Warfare and of the OSS. So then I think this might be, like I said, the whole time he's writing Ted Kaczynski letters, and he's reading the replies of the letters. And I think this is from one of those replies. It says, science and super machines know everything and regulate everything. Shouldn't be worried about the holes in theories, but science knowing too much. Yeah, science thinking it knows too much. I mean, that's the boastful pride of life. I don't get how you look at the world in these other these systematic ways, and you don't see how the Bible is a transcendent, valid, authentic compilation of documents. If it wasn't for just like the fact that I could doubt the fact that my mom loved me. I could always continually doubt that if I wanted to. It doesn't mean that she doesn't love me, but I could choose to doubt that. And I could come up with a whole other system in my mind based off of me doubting how much she loves me, or if she's even really my mom. And you could do that infinitely again. And that's exactly what they're trying to do. And then they're trying to calculate infinity and come up with a new solution, a new equation, a new formula. So then Henry Murray starts doing tests that take place at this secret station S, and it's a villa near DC. The attendees basically there are shown how elite groups behave under psychological pressure. this is what I mean by your imagination and your subconscious are like, again, they called the subconscious a battlefield. So now it's not even just a fight over the flesh as far as like what feels good and doesn't feel good. And, it's like the doing what's right when no one's watching. Yeah, the math on the thoughts that you're having right now, how many of those are directed or being held captive to Christ, and how many of those are just like, you don't know where they're coming from and where they're going? That's the kind of tabs you're going to have to be kind of taking. I mean, but it's nothing new for Christians. We've been called to this level of accountability forever. Everyone was complaining about the pressure of performing for a God. And it's like, yeah, well, you think that was psychological pressure. So, and from if I'm getting this right, The Authoritarian Personality, it basically was a book that was what could the social sciences contribute to peace. And it has the New World Order with world laws, a world police force, and a world government. Okay, so, and this is crazy because this is what Murray is saying here about the U.S. And as far as Christianity in the U.S. and the U.S. and our importance, I mean, it's crazy because we are kind of like a wild card. I don't know what the Book of Mormon says, but at least in the Bible, there's nothing that talks about what will happen in the U.S. Like we hear about Israel and things like this and what will happen during the end times, but it's almost like, I don't know, maybe I'm just out of the loop and I just don't know yet, but I don't think, besides us standing for freedom, I don't know where we stand religiously in the sense of in God's plan or vision for his kingdom long term. But I do know that there seems to be some level of awareness here in the States, and I think Christianity is still the most popular religion in America. So, but here's what Murray says. He says the U.S. is an abstraction of one world which we are on the verge of creating. The lot has fallen to the U.S. to take over the direction of carrying out this last and difficult experiment, a global campaign of good and evil. But completely dedicating ourselves to the idea of a one-world government, we will stir the hearts of the people on earth with hope of a security that can counter any form of totalitarianism. The nation citizen is obsolete and must be transformed to a world citizen. The CIA employs LSD 25, which is it's just interesting that it was made by a Swiss company. And he asks, how can a drug be used to break through the subconscious in order to program it in a new way? But Henry was obsessed with this idea of the superego that will immunize the proposed world citizen against all forms of totalitarianism. Stress tests to investigate personalities so that desirable patterns may then be created and controlled. Again, it's a man-made moral law as opposed to God's moral law. The thing that separates humans from all other creation is that we have this sense that we ought to be behaving better than we are. What do you do with that? And these guys obviously are going to believe in a superego, and that will immunize all of the world's citizens against all forms of totalitarianism, except for that form of totalitarianism. The stress test to investigate personalities so that desirable patterns may be created and controlled. Stress test like COVID? That's interesting. Yeah, because that wasn't stressful for so many people. Like we didn't get any data on how humans reacted in one of the most stressful situations ever. And what was crazy is it was biological. It wasn't even like stress from like weapons as far as bombs dropping. It was like a different kind of psychological stress. The other day, and this is kind of weird too, but there was the train that fell off the tracks in Ohio. And let's not even get into how I just found out that there was a movie based off like a year ago, there was a movie about a train that went off the tracks with chemicals in Palestine, Ohio. And some of the extras that were in that movie now a year later are living out the real life story here recently as that has happened in Palestine, Ohio. Cut to not even a couple weeks later here, 2 days ago, We had a truck hit a median on the I-10, and all this, what was it? It was like nitric. It was some gas that it was carrying, and so they had to like within like a couple mile radius, everyone had to stay shut in, and they couldn't leave the house, and so my brother-in-law's car got hit, and really we were out of danger. We were out of we didn't have to quarantine in our house for the night or whatever. Now, the whole city, at least from what I know, we couldn't run our AC or our heaters or anything that would bring air into the house. But we all got warnings on our phone, like for a flash flood or an Amber Alert. And so I just go, there were probably so many car accidents of people who were freaking out, who were out of the radius in which they really had to be cautious. But because they got that notification on their phone and they were maybe even 40 minutes away, it felt like they had a gun pointed to their head in that moment. Some people, that's how they deal with they hear about a stressful situation somewhere else and immediately it affects them. And to the point where they're getting in car accidents and stuff. And I just go, man, it's sad. It's sad that that's the, another thing I appreciated about basketball, right, is being a point guard and being pressed by the other team and trying to bring the ball up court while you're being pressed in a gym that's packed. And I just think that kind of pressure is, and you're doing something you love, but there is a way in which that is life. We can still love our lives, even though there's tons of high pressure situations, and we can still learn to, like in basketball, there's a shot clock, or in basketball against the press, you got to get the ball up past half court in 10 seconds. I think it might even be 8 in the NBA. I don't know. But either way, we used to do a drill where we would just count down from 10 seconds and we'd have to break the press in 10 seconds. And what happens is that most times kids, they bug out. They go 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi, 4, and they freak out and they throw the ball away. So you teach yourself, okay, no, 10 seconds, actually, how do you, what all can you accomplish in 10 seconds without feeling rushed? And so that's the same thing, right, with all of these high pressure situations. But so many people so many people kind of put the value on comfort and convenience. So now it's been even easier to kind of create a high level stress test. I mean, it's never been easier to put humans under stress. All right, now cut. Let's go to 1953 to 1964. So now Timothy Leary is a professor over at Harvard, and he's part of the LSD research project, again, directed by the CIA. And him and Murray start tripping together. I don't know how connected they are, but basically the next thing that I wrote down is the MK Ultra and the or artichoke psychology control techniques involved elite university scientists from the U.S. And Murray filmed all these experiments. And since then, they've all disappeared. And the thing about the acid, too, that they were using is that it was like a magic mushroom synthetic. So those tests, again, are 1953 through 1964. Or no, in 1957, he takes those tests. And that's the thing for me is, even with the psychedelic stuff that I've done, man, it's coming on 10 years. And it's still accessible like all your top memories are in your life. It's been 10 years later, but yet, man, like there were definitely times where I was like, am I ever going to go a day without thinking about this? And I'm so grateful that I have. And even when the moment when I did that stuff and it happened, and there was like a part of me had this awareness of that I might never do this again in my life, and that in 10 years from now I would be looking, it was like there was like the timelines in which this was just a phenomenon, and then there was kind of a timeline in which, okay, is this something that I'm trying to cultivate, again and again. But anyways, all I'm saying is for Ted Kaczynski to be a part of all that crazy stuff, to spend 21 years in the woods, you would think that would be a long time. But the reality is that time probably went by pretty quickly for him. And as far as just processing everything that they did to him, jeez. And then, just everyone in the documentary who just has painted him to be the evil person. And it's like, okay, well, when is Hollywood going to make the movie, right? Because just like we do all the time where the villain, we go back and we show that the villain actually was only a villain because of their background and they got hurt. The way I saw him after this documentary, and I remember as a kid all that stuff happening and just being like, what? Like, this guy's just crazy. You could never imagine anything but just pure evil or insanity to be the thing, the catalyzer for someone to do something like that. You could never even imagine that there was someone to blame but that person. And it's like when you start to investigate this stuff, you start to go, oh my God, there are definitely some people who ultimately I can get how you put responsibility on Ted Kaczynski, but it's the same thing these guys are doing with people's minds that they want to do with a computer mind. They want to fabricate this new mind that we all put our trust in, that they'll wash their hands of the responsibility regardless. Just as long as they get to program it. I mean, in the experiments, man, there were no, it wasn't like a meditation, like, dude, it just looked like some of the videos that they did show, it's so cringy. Yeah, so during the trial, though, for Ted Kaczynski's trial, they actually transported one of the cabins that he lived in to the court. And I just thought that was an interesting fact. Then they showed video of on the truck, they loaded it up and took it in. And then I have, what kind of violence has caused more harm in the history of mankind? The violence that was sanctioned by the state or the violence that was used without sanction by individuals? Oh yeah, you guys tell me. Jeez. I mean, I already know where he's going with that. Mirror World Co. is based off a book, but it's a book that depicts the future of a virtual society based off future virtual society based off software. So like the universities can look at this software and kind of figure out, what's going on, how like the vibe of the students, their mood, how well people are learning. And of course, every time we measure these things, these are all on standards of our own. And that's why I do kind of think God knew what he was doing when he wanted us to create unity amongst ourselves by making him the standard and not giving us all these outs for all these other standards, though the Holy Spirit does kind of work with us on a subjective level to meet us where we're at. It's like, because you do have the objective standard of code of conduct, the moral law, what we're all should be striving for. But then you have the Holy Spirit in Christ meeting people on a personal level. I guess Brockman and Epstein are connected too. I haven't looked too much more into that. Who is entitled to establish the law? In a civilized society, the state establishes the law. In a non-civilized society, customs and habits establish the law. Revolution only means by which people can resist the technological system, and is the only means to resist the technological system. And that was the last quote of the movie. And again, that's when you kind of find out that Ted Kaczynski is writing this guy. Yeah, I mean, again, this idea that to revolt, we will need to revolt against the technological system. I mean, that's the only thing left. And if we don't do it and at least buy ourselves some time, then the only choice we have in the near future is to wait for Christ to come back. Yeah, that's it for today's podcast. Go ahead and let me know. Do you think the universe is an open universe or is it a closed universe?